So we're going to finish our story, and we can see that our hunch was correct when it said the canoe turned turtle up, that it flipped over. Now, in the previous lesson, we identified and summarized the key background details in the first part of Quiet. So today we're going to jump into the main part of the story, because the rest of it was just giving us kind of some information about Lad. And so we're going to summarize these events to see what's really happened now that we've reached the plot or the problem of the story. So we're going to read paragraphs 9 to 16. I know we already read some of 9 yesterday, but we're going to start right here because this is where our story picks up, just so we can remember. And we're going to be numbering our key events this time. Remember, we can number, we can underline it however we want to. So I'm going to switch back and forth so we get used to those. Then, all at once, into the sweet routine of the House of Peace came horror. It began on a blustery, sour October day. The mistress had crossed the lake to the village, in her canoe, with Lad curled up in a furry heap in the prow. In the return trip, about 50 yards from the shore, the canoe struck sharply and obliquely against a half-submerged log that a fall of freshlet had swept down the river above the lake. At the same moment, a flaw of wind caught the canoe's quarter, and after the manner of such an eccentric craft, the canvas shell proceeded to turn turtle. Into ice-chill water splashed the two occupants. Lad bobbed to the top and glanced around at the mistress to learn if this was a new practical joke. But instantly he saw it was no joke at all, so far as she was concerned. Swathed and cramped by the folds of her heavy outing skirt, the mistress was making no progress shoreward, and the dog flung himself through the water toward her with a rush that left his shoulders and half his back above the surface. In a second he had reached her and had caught her sweater shoulder in his teeth. So, in these paragraphs, Lad and the mistress are knocked out of their canoe into the lake, and the mistress is unable to swim to shore. That's definitely a key event because the main characters are in danger. So I'm going to be numbering it this time. Let me get there we go. And I'll use my Galaxy pen. And so this is, from today's part, this is going to be, I'm going to say number 1. And then that wind catches them and turns them over as 2. And then what's happening here? Well, he's looking around and he's trying to figure out if this is a joke or not. And then he decides, well, it's not. So I need to rescue her because she's not able to swim. So now, how can I put that in my what? In my summary. So let's add our summary right here. While canoeing across the lake, they hit a log and the wind knocks the boat over, period. Lad looks around and sees that the mistress is not able to swim. So he grabs her and tries to pull her to safety, period. And now let's make that so it's a little bigger. And I have to change that because it said well. Okay, and font size 16. Okay, so let's now head to number 13 for us. Number 13. She had the presence of mind to lie out straight, as though she were floating, and to fill her lungs with a swift intake of breath. The dog's burden was thus made infinitely lighter than if she had struggled or had lain in a posture less easy for towing. Yet he made scant headway, until she wound one hand in his mane, and, still lying motionless and stiff, bade him loose his hold on her shoulder. In this way, by a sustained effort that wrenched every giant muscle in the collie's body, they came at last to land. So here we have another event. In these paragraphs, Lad rescues her. This is also a key event because it gets rid of that dangerous situation, eliminates it. It shows how brave and strong Lad is. So this is going to be my next event that I'm going to put for number 4, is where he's bringing her to shore. Oops, but I labeled the wrong one. Right here. He brings her to shore. So now, how can I put that for my summary? This one's going to be a little simpler. Lad pulls her to safety using all of his strength. So let me And now let's make that font size 16 so we can read it better. And now I'll go to our next paragraph, paragraph 16. Vastly rejoiced was Lad, and inordinately proud of himself, and the plaudits of the master and mistress were music to him. Indefinably, he understood he had done a very wonderful thing, and that everybody on the place was talking about him, and that they were all trying to pet him at once. Matters soon quieted down, and the incident seemed to end. But remember, I just think it's interesting here. They're saying they're all trying to pet him. And remember, up here at the beginning, it said that he doesn't like those pets, but he's tolerating it again, because that's the guest law. So when they get back to land, Lad is praised by everyone in the place for rescuing the mistress. So I think that's my next key event, saying, hey, you did a good job and everyone's recognizing it now. So now that we have these, we have a good idea of our summary. Now, we could do our summary like we did here, or we could have this long summary. Either one would work, because remember, summary is just to remind us what's going on. But first, before we do a condensed summary, I'm going to put my summary for Lad right here. And then stretch it out. There we go. When they get back to the place, comma, everyone is talking about Lad and trying to pet him, period. Now let's shrink it down. And get rid of that D. So we have these three parts that are summary, but we can also change it if we want to something a little different. We could have a shorter summary if we want. We could have had this. Lad and the mistress go out in a canoe, and the canoe overturns. Lad shows his strength and bravery by dragging the mistress to shore. Everyone in the place is grateful to Lad. Any one of these are acceptable. So now, let's head to our last chunk right here. Paragraph 17. Instead, it had just begun. For within an hour, the mistress, who for days had been half sick with the cold, was stricken with a chill, and by night she was in the first stages of pneumonia. Uh-oh. So that's not good. She got sick. So that's going to be my next one. That's number 6. Then over the place descended gloom. A gloom Lad could not understand until he went upstairs at dinner time to escort the mistress as usual to the dining room. But to his light scratch at the door, there was no reply. He scratched again, and presently master came out of the room and ordered him downstairs again. Then, from the master's voice and look, Lad understood that something was terribly amiss. Also, as she did not appear at dinner, and as she was for the first time in his life forbidden to go into her room, he knew the mistress was the victim of whatever mishap had befallen. So it's saying, remember, before he had to run the house, he could go everyone, and now he's not allowed to go into the mistress's room. So that's something that's important. Something has changed in her story. So we're going to do our summary for this part. The mistress gets pneumonia, period. Lad realizes something is different when he is not able to escort her to the dining room, and that he is no longer allowed to go into her room, period. So something sad has kind of happened, and it's affecting Lad. It's affecting our whole story, in fact. So let's get to our last paragraphs. Paragraph 21. A strange man with a black bag came in the house early in the evening, and he and the master were closeted for an indeterminable time in the mistress's room. Lad had crept dejectedly upstairs behind them, and sought to crowd into the room at their heels. The master ordered him back, and shut the door in his face. So we have this man dressed in black is coming, or not dressed in black, but with a black bag, came to visit. So I think that's an important part, because we have the stranger, and she's sick. Lad lay down on the threshold, his nose to the crack at the bottom of the door, and waited. He heard the murmur of speech. Once he caught the mistress's voice. It was changed and muffled, and with a puzzling new note in it, but undeniably the mistress. And his tail thumped hopefully on the hall floor, but no one came to let him in. And after the mandate to keep out, he dared not scratch for admittance. "Those other dogs of yours outside there," the doctor said to the master, as they went down the stairs. Raised a fearful racket when my car came down the drive just now. Better send them all away somewhere until she is better. The house must be kept perfectly quiet. Uh-oh. So he's saying, get rid of all these dogs. I'll send them over to the boarding kennels in the morning, he answered. All except Lad. He and I are going to see this through together. He'll be quiet if I tell him to. Whew. So it sounds like Lad, thankfully, isn't going to join those other dogs. But I was worried for a second. So what's this summary going to be? Well, let me put it right here for us. A man comes to the house with a black bag to check on the mistress, period. We hear the mistress's voice, though it's different than before, period. The man says that all the dogs must leave so that the mistress can relax in quietness, period. The master says he'll send them all away except for Lad, period. So now let's change that so we can read a little better. I'll make it a little bigger. So that's our summary of this section right here. Now, if we wanted, we could combine 17 to 25, and we could have done a shorter summary that said something like this. The mistress becomes sick. Lad is worried about her, so he lies by the door to her room. The doctor recommends that all the dogs be sent away so that there will be quiet. The master says that Lad can stay because he trusts Lad to remain quiet if asked. Now, one thing we'll notice is our story's done, so we're going to go and assume good intentions that the mistress ends up being okay. Now, what you probably noticed in this story is that there were a lot of adverbs in the story, things that describe verbs. So I have these sentences for us that are pulled from some events that happened in the story. So let me make them a little bigger for us. Before the boating accident, Lad walked around the place. And then we have these words that also appeared in our story. And I want to see if you guys can figure out which words go where. And if we don't know, then remember, we can always look words up. And what's nice about this is we can look words up with this smart lookup. So we don't even have to, oops, I don't have mine set up. We don't even have to go anywhere. It will tell us right here. Terribly means very or extremely. So we have those options as well. So what do we have? Before the boating accident, Lad walked around the place. What? Did he walk around it hopefully, assuredly, dejectedly, civilly? Well, if we're not sure, then we look those up, or we can keep reading to see if any of these others fit in as well. After he walked around the house, what? The master was blank about the mistress. Oh, well, remember, we looked that one up right away, and we saw terribly means extremely or very. So we can put terribly in right there, and now we have that one taken care of. Lad climbed the stairs blank, but the master shut the door in his face. Lad treated other people blank, but he didn't want to be bothered by them. So let's look one up. Let's look at this guy up. And so I'm going to use my smart lookup. And it says it's a form of civil. That didn't really help me. So when I click on it, what do we have here? Well, when I clicked on civil, it brings this up. It says relating to ordinary citizens and their concerns. Courteous and polite. Ah, that's the word I know, polite. So Lad treated other people politely. Ooh, that sounds like what he did. Because remember, he doesn't like being petted, but he's still tolerating that because of that guest law. So now we have two of these taken care of. So now let's check our next one. So we have hopefully. That's a pretty easy one. Hope means that you're thinking something's good going to happen. So we have before the boating accident, Lad walked around the place hopefully. Well, he didn't know there was something bad going to happen, so it's probably not that. After he walked around the house, what? Doesn't sound hopefully maybe yet. So what about this one though? Lad climbed the stairs hopefully. Remember, he's hoping that the mistress is going to be okay. but he doesn't know for sure. So I think this one's supposed to be hopefully. Now we have assuredly and dejectedly. So let's look up dejectedly and see what we have for that definition. It's that same thing, dejected. So remember, if I don't see my definition here, I can click on that word. It'll bring me to the next one. Sad or depressed. So sad. So before the boating accident, lad walked around the place dejectedly. He wasn't sad because the boating accident had happened. But after it, remember, he's sad because the mistress is where? She's locked in her room. And he doesn't know what's wrong when she won't come to dinner time. So he's probably walking around dejectedly. Which now means what? This one right here, assuredly, is probably that first one. But let's just check just to make sure. Confidently. Before the boating accident, Lad walked around the place confidently. Yeah, remember, he thought he was the boss. He thought he was in charge. And remember, he even had special privileges because he could go wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted. So that is how our author used those adjectives to explain more in the story. Now remember, what was this whole focus actually supposed to be? It wasn't to learn about the dog, but it was to learn about point of view. And you'll notice the point of view was third person. It wasn't being told by the dog I. He didn't say, I looked and saw that the mistress was flailing for air and couldn't swim, so I decided to grab her. It's using that word she, the dog, he, him. So it's that third person again.